Hi, everyone. This is Laura Rodriguez, and I'm accompanied by Sierra Mathias, our operations associate. Thank you so much for joining us. We have had this Q&A webinar now for the past 3 years, I think, and it's just an effort to create clarity and ensure that folks sort of have an opportunity to ask new and additional questions as you go along, in addition to those that we get pretty regularly, which we've created a slide deck for. So again, thanks for joining us. Everyone is muted, and so if you have questions for to clarify a particular question we're on, please shoot a text chat in the chat box. Up to you if you want everyone to see it, or if you want just us, Sierra and myself, to see it, and we'll note that. We'll answer that question to the best of our ability. And if you have additional questions that you didn't see, we'll give some time at the end of the slide deck for you to ask new questions. You'll also, this meeting is going to be recorded. We're going to post this on our website, and so you'll either have a chance to go back to it, or you can just share or let other folks know, but it will be posted up on our website so that others who aren't able to join us today can hear and access it as well. All right, and so as folks trickle in, hopefully you can catch up, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. So thanks again for your interest in the Youth Outside letter of intent, or letter of inquiry, I guess, interchangeably, yeah, letter of intent period. That period is open through November 30th with sort of a firm timestamp deadline. Please be sure to read those guidelines carefully and with detail. We've already gotten a few questions as we've gone along, and the last couple of weeks that the period opened up as it relates to these commonly asked questions. So we'll just dive in. And in fact, we lead with that very first most commonly asked question. So if you want to go ahead and go into the first question. Great. So that first question is, my organization's budget exceeds $3 million, but the budget for my programs is much less. Does my organization qualify for funding? We have decided to be very intentional about supporting smaller organizations, and so to us that does mean that we look at the 501c3. If your organization has a 501c3 and several sites or regions, different offices, or just a different program budget, which most organizations will have their own program budget, we are looking at that overall organizational budget. If you're thinking to yourself, I'm not a 501c3, then we're not talking about your fiscal sponsor's budget. That isn't quite the same, right? And so if you are a project under a fiscal sponsor, we do want to know your project's overall budget, not your fiscal sponsors necessarily. Okay. So the next question is, can a fiscal agent apply on behalf of my organization? And if so, whose financial information should be submitted? Okay, so I think I answered that. Your fiscal agent can apply on your behalf. I don't know exactly, when that question came in, whether folks meant, can we have their grant writer write a grant for us? I mean, on your end, you can do whatever you want, but the project should be very clear that the project or program that is being supported by that fiscal sponsor is the one that is applying. The third question that we get is, Youth Outside has provided grants to other programs and projects that have the same fiscal agent. Is there any increase in likelihood or decrease in likelihood for an organization to receive a grant because of that relationship with the fiscal agent that Youth Outside may have? Not more or less likely to get a grant based on sharing a fiscal agent as another organization, and not more or less likely to receive a grant based on any past history that one might imagine Youth Outside has with that fiscal agent. Okay, and so I think I'll just take a moment here to talk a little bit about our process, our selection process, and just in terms of likelihood, perhaps we can just sort of extend that question to, you know, what is the likelihood that an organization who's been granted in the past will get granted again? And so here I'll pause to say a little bit more about our selection process and how we work to achieve, to the best of our ability, an equitable and inclusive process. And so at Youth Outside, our grant-making selection process includes several layers of review. We have an internal review first. Well, even before the internal review, organizations have to meet those initial criteria in terms of organizational budget, for example, and the other, you know, 2 or 3 listed criteria that are in the sort of the first page of that LOI guidelines. So there's just that basic criteria check. Then there is an internal review here at Youth Outside. We review the LOIs and make a first round of selection for which LOIs will move forward into that second level of review. That second level of review is conducted by an external advisory panel, folks who are external to us as an organization, and folks who are, as much as possible, external even to the greater outdoor environmental field. We aim for that panel to really be in a position where they are relying on the information that is being provided in the LOI to score using a rubric that we provide them. And that rubric is not available. So for folks who were wondering, and we've gotten that question below, that rubric is not an outward-facing public document. But so the external advisory panel will review the LOIs that get moved forward, and then they in turn make their recommendation for which LOIs would move forward to a third and final review that comes back to Youth Outside internally. And so it's there where, you know, thinking about more likely or less likely, it really, that doesn't kick in that way, right? And so it's not about the years that perhaps organizations have been able to build a relationship with Youth Outside and folks who've gone on site visits, or it's really, the LOI is very much the document that everyone is looking at. Everyone who's looking at these is looking at that LOI for the information that they need. So I hope that answers to a great degree in terms of the likelihood of sort of being selected to move forward, and what is influencing that. The next question is about the grantee cohort and just wanting to get a sense for what that looks like. So where are the meetings held, how long the sessions are, how many people would we hope attend the sessions, and are there any meetings sort of virtually by telephone or by video? So I'll say the trend is usually the meetings are held in Oakland or nearby. Sometimes we find ourselves in Berkeley or San Francisco, but we do typically hold the sessions here in Oakland. They're usually about 5.5 hours, so it's pretty much a full day, especially if you're driving for a little bit that morning. We usually start around 10 o'clock and end by 3:30. And we have in the past, including this year, held bi-monthly meetings that start in April. So it's not 6 sessions, it's 5 sessions right now, and they start in April and go every other month. The dates of those should be provided. If we didn't provide them, we probably didn't provide them yet, but folks who get an invitation to submit a full application down the line here, those organizations will have the exact dates and will have an opportunity to determine whether that's a requirement or a part of this agreement that they can meet and can decide then. In terms of how many people, we ask for at least 1 person and up to 2 from each organization. and I'll say again, it is a part of the agreement, and so we do expect that each organization is able to send at least one representative. It doesn't have to be the same representative. It doesn't always have to be the ED. It doesn't always have to be the program director or person who's in charge of programs. It's really a great idea to share the opportunity of capacity building and professional development, and also just to give each other some additional capacity to deliver on your programs and not necessarily have these sessions be attended by all the same person. And we do believe in the power of in-person connections and networking, and so we have not to this date delivered any of the sessions via webinar or conference, or have made that available as an option. That might change in the future, but I don't see it changing for 2020. I see a question on our chat box that is, I think we're gonna get to that question in a moment, about where an organization is based and who you're working to engage. So I think we're gonna get to that question in a second. But I do wanna maybe pause here and see if there are any questions about anything that we've covered so far. And I'll give you a moment because I know you can only chat the question. Okay. The next question you're seeing on your slides, on your screen here is, what do you mean by a line item for your 2019 operating budget? And so what we mean is that we don't want to see a whole, a page-long 2019 breakdown of your 2019 budget. We want to know, to the best of your ability. We know we're still in the January to December calendar year. You might be on a fiscal year of July that starts in July. So you can tell us about your fiscal year if that rings true for you. But what we want to see is what you expect your overall 2020 operating budget to be, and have that provided in a little bit of a breakdown. How much is going to staffing, how much is going to programs, what's going to some of the other big line items that we do want to see the 2020 operating budget, what that looks like, and then the greater overall 2020 expenses that you'll have. But we also want to know, to support us in understanding eligibility criteria, we want to know what you anticipate your 2019 final operating budget expenses to be. So we just need to see a line inside of your 2020 budget, wherever you'd like to put it, as set aside at the, in the footer, whatever you need to do to sort of let us know that it's separate and that it's the 2019 line item. We just want to also know what you expect your overall 2019 operating budget to be. Okay. Great. The next question here is there a cost share for this grant? And what are eligible costs for the grant? And so, cost sharing is about, meeting some sort of determined amount that is you're responsible for, or that we might assign our awards to go to some things, and we expect that you will cover other things. And that tends to be with grants or awards that are sort of project or program specific, right? Our grants, however, are general operating grants. And so therefore, there really isn't a restriction to how you will use that money to best support you delivering on your programs for that year. That said, and this is why we do want to see a budget, your proposed 2020 budget, is we don't necessarily, we might have our concerns, and we might want to have a conversation or check in if what we see is that an organization is planning to spend the entirety of the amount that they're requesting, I don't know, on paying for a consultant, right? If that's not clearly outlined in terms of how it's going to support you delivering on your overall programs and on the services and the mission of your organization, right? So we do want to get a sense for how you're planning to spend the amount that you're requesting, to get a sense for your priorities and to understand what you're needing. But it is a general operating grant, so there are no restrictions in that way. The next question that we have on the screen is, the organization I work for is not based in Northern or Central California. However, our programs take place in Northern and or Central California, and the youth we serve come from those regions. Does my organization qualify for funding? So, yes. The most important piece is that youth served come from or reside in these regions, okay? There was a question that I think I'll just make sure is being covered here. It also is an organization that's based in Southern California and wants to connect youth from Southern California to Monterey County, to Northern California. And so again, what we'll say is that we really are looking to our parameters around geographic footprint to be Central and Northern California, and that the people who are being engaged are from those regions. And so if the young people are coming, 100% of those young people are coming from a region that is outside of Central and Northern California, that doesn't necessarily fall in line with what we're hoping to achieve in the way of support. I see a question back to sort of reporting on the budget, fiscal year that starts in July. Can we share out our fiscal year 19 budget? Yeah, along with your fiscal year 20 budget. Yes, you can do that. So this, and then there's another question here in the chat box that is similar. Your fiscal year starts in September. You can provide us information for the fiscal year that you're in. However, it's best supportive of us understanding where you're at and where you're going. Okay. There's a question in terms of where being located on the East Coast. If you have programs that are supporting young people in Central California, and your organization as a whole falls within that $3 million annual operating budget or less, right? We don't, it's not about the Central California office being under 3 million. It's about the entire organization being under 3 million. So if that's true for your organization that's located in the East Coast, and you're engaging youth who reside in Central California, that I think meets the eligibility criteria, that piece of it. Mm-hmm. So thank you for asking that question. I'm just gonna pause. Know that the moments of silence are intentional. We're seeing some things come in, so we just want to make sure we're not moving on too fast. Okay. And so in terms of understanding the geography, again, I know that when we say Central and Northern California, it can be vague. That feels helpful and also vague, right? And so think about perhaps as a guiding frame, the PG&E service territory, as what we mean by Central and Northern California. Very specifically, Fresno and Sacramento counties do fall within that region, and so are eligible to submit an LOI. Next question, do you offer grants for existing programs, or does a new program need to be created? We definitely do not expect for a new program to be created. We want to support organizations that are doing the work as we outline it, and that meet sort of those goals and priorities as we outline them in our guidelines. It could be a tried and true program that's been around for many, many years. So there's no need to create a new program to apply. However, if a new program is something that you're thinking about, right, if a new program that you want to launch is the reason why you're applying now, that's also okay. However, we definitely expect for this new program that hasn't launched to be thoroughly thought out, right? We want this proposal to still be able to answer thoughtfully and critically and with strategy the pieces that we're looking to understand about that program, right? Who you're going to be engaging, how you're going to do that, right? And everything else that we ask folks to address that comes from the LOI guidelines. All right, so again, it's okay if the program you're proposing has yet to launch, but I just want to say again that it definitely should be a program that you've given some thought to, and that you're able to demonstrate and talk about your strategy and your well thought out plans for rolling it out. The next question here is there a preference, or is there better alignment for wider reach with more participants served, or more in-depth engagement with fewer participants in longer programs? This is definitely not about being able to list the biggest number, right? If you've read our LOI guidelines, if you've been around Youth Outside for a while, if you've engaged with us, if you've engaged in our process, if you've been one of the organizations who's received feedback from us in the past, and if you don't know us, thanks for being here, and I hope that this helps to answer that question. What I hope that folks understand about Youth Outside's priorities is that we're looking to support organizations that are providing meaningful experiences to the outdoors. And meaningful can take many, many meanings, right? It can look differently. It means different things. And in our LOI guidelines, one of the things we ask folks to talk about, if they can, don't make it up if it's not there, but one of the things we ask folks to talk about is how you're creating, how you're sort of ensuring or supporting the outdoors being an integral part of young people's lives, right? How is this something that is going with them wherever they go, that participating in the outdoors is something that they do on a regular basis? And so when we think about more in-depth engagement, there's many ways that you might be able to offer us information about how you're doing that. And they're just the short answer is, being able to say that you connect 2,000 students a year to the outdoors isn't any more elevated to the top. If an organization is not able to let us know how they're providing, in-depth and meaningful engagement. So that's the last of the questions here on the screen. And we're sort of trying to navigate the chat box here to see if there were any additional questions. Okay, great. And so there's a question here about receiving feedback. It's that, and whether an organization who supplied in the past, is able to receive feedback. So, perhaps maybe we received an email about this. I don't know if it's the same person, same organization, but we can try to go back to old LOIs, which have sort of, depending on how far they got in the process, will have different amounts or layers of feedback, right? Because there will be different reviewers. And we can try to offer you that feedback. It's a little bit of a time crunch right now. But one of the things that I'll say, I think perhaps just to address we've applied a couple times and haven't gotten it in, and to the question of alignment, is that the majority of organizations that submit an LOI are in alignment, particularly initially, right? You focus on those initial criteria, and maybe it's not 100% alignment with all three of our priorities, but maybe two of the three or one of the three. And so it's typically every year not about, organizations not being in alignment, and it's often very much the case. I mean, last year we had a total of, I want to say 90, maybe somewhere between 80 and 90 LOIs received, and we granted to 15 or 16 new organizations. So there's definitely going to be many organizations who are in alignment. The programs, the activities you're doing are in alignment and might not make it through the layers of review. Now, again, our process aims to support readers in being able to respond to questions about the impact of an organization, right? We put out a rubric. We ask a reader to identify the responses to a series of questions around impact, right? So we're really hoping that an organization's LOI is able to demonstrate, and I want to really emphasize the word demonstrate, the impact that they're having, as it might relate to health and well-being, as it might relate to being relevant and working to be relevant, and equitable and inclusive, right? We're looking for that LOI to demonstrate, as it might be able to, how you're working to sort of create or instill environmental stewardship ethics that are long-lasting in individuals, right? We can talk about a beach cleanup, sure, in that moment we've engaged in stewardship, but how are we, how is that LOI demonstrating to any reader? If you imagine the reader to not know anything about your organization, how are we, able to see through demonstrated statements in your LOI that you are having that impact? So I really want to emphasize that, if you haven't received funding in the past, if your LOI hasn't been selected, oftentimes it's not that the program and activities are not in alignment or fit in nicely with what we are asking for in the LOI. It's that we're really looking with a critical lens of equity and inclusion to understand from an LOI what an organization is doing to have the impact as we stated. So I hope that answers that question. There's another question here in the chat box that asks for 5 community partners and just asking for clarity in terms of what we mean and what kinds of relationships would count as a community partner. So really it's anyone that you'd like partner with to be able to offer your program. So people often list the school partners, the schools that they have regular relationships with, where the students are coming from. Maybe if they're coming to a particular location for programming. Other folks, sorry for the background music, we're in downtown Oakland. You might be able to hear music coming from way down below. Other partners folks list are other organizations other nonprofits potentially that they do business with to maybe sort of double up on their impact, or that they sort of work with each other to enhance their programs and to offer their programming together. So it's really, in the past we used to ask for 5 community partners that did not include funders, right? And then separately we asked for those funders, just to give you maybe 1 or 2 more lines in this 2-page maximum LOI. We've removed the request for you to list your funding partners. And so I would say focus more on your community partners, anybody that you work with to enhance or to deliver on programs. So the second part of that question is it okay for the partners that are listed to be folks you plan to work with in the next year, but you aren't currently? Yeah, you can definitely include that, and just be clear, right? And just offer that this is a partnership that will start in 2020. Are there any additional questions? Oh, great. So yes, I'll say again that this webinar is being recorded and we are going to make it available on our website. So if you were not able to join us right at 2, you definitely can access this and listen to it. Any other questions? Well, great. So if there are no other questions, we'll click off of here slowly in case somebody's typing. But the last slide that you have is my email information, and this contact information is also on our website. You can also reach out to Sierra at operations@youthoutside.org. But if you have any additional questions, in fact, especially reach out to Sierra if you're having any technical issues. Any technical issues with this webinar, or any technical issues with downloading our application, or any of that kind of stuff, if you notice something sort of strange or odd on our website, or you're having any kind of access concerns, please reach out to us. But if you have any additional questions about the LOI or your eligibility, please don't hesitate to reach out I'm at Laura@youthoutside.org. So with that, I think we'll just say thank you again for hopping on and for being engaged and for your interest. Good luck, and we look forward to receiving your LOIs. Bye-bye.